Welcome. My name is Chiho Sawada. I'm the director of the Japan Policy Research Institute, that's JPRI, here at University of San Francisco's Center for the Pacific Rim. Tonight, we'll have a wonderful talk, Presidential Contest and Prospects for Peace in the Pacific, or focusing on 2012 Taiwan elections, process, outcomes, and implications by Clayton Dube, Executive Director of the U.S. China Institute at the University of Southern California. The lecture is presented by JPRI in partnership with Asia Society Northern California and the UC Berkeley chapter of Strait Talk. I'd also like to thank our promotional co-sponsors, the Institute of East Asian Studies, University of California, Berkeley, Taiwanese American Professionals, and the Fromm Institute for Lifelong Learning. But before we proceed to the talk, I'd like to mention something, which is that this talk opens the 2012 Berkeley-San Francisco Strait Talk Symposium. So I didn't actually mention it to Clay, but this is a keynote talk. Don't want to have the pressure. The Strait Talk Symposium is a week of workshops and public events to help promote peaceful relations across the Taiwan Strait and indeed the Pacific Rim. Strait Talk is a student-centered, non-partisan program. It's a dialogue program that seeks to transform cross-strait and broader Asia-Pacific relations by connecting young people from both sides of the Taiwan Strait and from the United States, and by empowering them through conflict resolution training to become the next generation of peacemakers. And so we have student delegates today from China, Taiwan, and across the United States. So we'd like to take a minute to introduce them, and towards that end, I'd like to invite the Berkeley Strait Talk Chapter President, Vincent Wang, to the stage. Please welcome Vincent Wang.
Good evening, everyone, and we just wanted to say again how grateful we are for Chiho, for the Center for Pacific Rim, and here and the University of San Francisco for sponsoring us and for supporting us each year. And for this year, the Berkeley-San Francisco chapter has a lot of exciting events and panels planned ahead. So if you guys are interested, please go on our website, straighttalk.org, to see what events are coming up and to see if you will be interested in coming. Following this, I would like to invite my co-chair, Pierce, and he will introduce this year's delegates.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pierce McClory. I'm the co-chair with Vincent of Strait Talk Berkeley San Francisco. And at this time, we'd like to introduce the delegates, starting with Angel. Would you be so kind as to just stand up, identify yourself? Why don't we just hold our applauses to the end? think we should give them another round of applause. All you 15 delegates are going to be in for an amazing week, get to know each other, and understand more about cross-strait relations. And at this time, I'd also like to have the organizers stand up. Let's start with you, Sword. Just as your position. Victoria? Cheaping? Okay, Jessica, would you like to stand up? Any other organizers? Helen? And then we'd also like to send a special acknowledgement to Professor Tatsushi Arai, our professional conflict resolution mediator, who's so kind of us to join us for this week.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out once again, and I think I will pass this back to Gio.
So I'd just like to introduce our distinguished speaker, Clayton Dube, who has headed the U.S. China Institute since it was established in 2006. The Institute focuses on the U.S.-China relationship and works to inform public discussions about the relationship's importance, not just to the U.S. and China, but to the entire world. His research is focused on how economic and political change in China since 1900 affected the lives of people in small towns. He has taught Asian world history at several colleges and has written teaching guides on Chinese history. Dube writes USCI's Talking Points. He has also served as associate director for Modern China, an academic quarterly published by Sage Publications. He first visited China in 1982, living and working there for 3 years. He has since returned many times to carry out field work, to teach and lead study tours. He serves on the board of the National Consortium for Teaching About Asia, the editorial board of Education About Asia, and on the advisory boards for the USC Center for International Studies, the Center for International Business Education and Research, and the UCLA Confucius Institute. Dube is a fellow of the Center on Public Diplomacy, so a truly accomplished speaker. And please join me in welcoming Clay Dube.
Thank you for that excessively generous introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it was wonderful to have a few seconds to hear who's here. And although we didn't get a chance to talk, we know why you're here, right? To focus on this cross-strait relationship, to gain a better understanding of that situation and its importance to the people on both sides of the strait and to the world at large. And so I feel really privileged to be here. I want to thank Professor Sawada, the Japan Policy Research Institute, the many other sponsors of today's event. And I also want to say that I'm extremely jealous. How is it that Berkeley has such a program? How is it that the University of San Francisco has such a program, and we at USC don't? And across town at UCLA, we have our own cross-strait issue down in Los Angeles. And so you get this one taken care of. Please come down and help us with that. In any event, it's a great honor to be here. And it's a pleasure to see some old friends and to make new ones. So thank you very much for this opportunity. What we're going to do at the outset is look at clips from a documentary that we have prepared at the USC, U.S. China Institute. Our institute does all sorts of things, research, instruction, but one of the things that we're trying to do is to make use of new media and to make use of old media, meaning television, to create, to provide timely, reliable information about critical issues in China and critical issues in the U.S.-China relationship. And so our documentaries are available at our website, china.usc.edu, and this is one of them. This one looks at the relationship between Taiwan and China. The title of the documentary is The Thaw. So clearly, we have a point of view on where the relationship is at this moment. It's definitely improving. And so what we'll see is about 10 minutes from that documentary, right at the start and then towards the end, and then we'll discuss the election and a number of other things. If you'd like to learn more about our documentaries, please feel free to ask. Please feel free to raise any kinds of questions about them. We certainly invite that. Now, the key people driving this documentary are one of our colleagues at USC, Mike Shinoy, who for a quarter century reported from both Beijing and Taipei and returned at our behest to work on this project. In addition to Mike, we have a whole host of students that have participated in creating this documentary. The editor, the film, all of this, the filming, all of this was done by our students. And so this is an example of what people are capable of. You folks are making peace. We're trying to talk about what the challenge is. So right now, a few minutes from The Thaw.
At the Qingchuangkong Air Base in central Taiwan, Major Chen Zhilong revs the engines on his fighter, preparing to respond to an attack from mainland China. This is only a drill, but it's a reminder that the political conflict between Taiwan and China, legacy of the Chinese Civil War 7 decades ago, remains unresolved. And, given long-standing U.S. support for Taiwan, still makes the Taiwan Strait a potentially dangerous flashpoint.
It is the one place in which, if things go very wrong, the U.S. can be involved in a shooting war with China.
At the moment, that notion seems far-fetched. Relations between Taiwan and the mainland are better now than they've ever been, bolstered by a dramatic increase in economic ties, and a government in Taipei, headed by President Ma Ying-jeou, that has backed off the talk of an independent Taiwan, which fueled a sharp increase in tension between Taiwan and Beijing under Ma's predecessor, Chen Shui-bian.
We want to institutionalize the cross-strait interaction so that gradually the two sides can interchange, can interact with each other in a way a normal economic entities do.
Strategically, the cross-strait situation is in the best shape it's been in many years. The Ma Ying-jeou administration has sought to build bridges across the strait to the mainland with the explicit objective of reducing tensions and, in many ways, enhancing interdependence across the strait.
Ma Ying-jeou's policy is much more stable, much more responsible and predictable. So you can trust him. And you can do business with him in a trustful way.
Preoccupied with Afghanistan, the Middle East, and the economy,
because the health of our economy depends in part on what we do right now.
The Obama administration has supported Ma's moves.
The steps that the Ma government has taken to improve relations with the mainland are very welcomed by the U.S. government. They have reduced the level of tension. They have reduced the likelihood of miscalculation and misunderstanding. and therefore reduce the likelihood of some incident leading to confrontation and even potentially conflict.
But even with the thaw, the most intractable issues between Taiwan and China are still unresolved.
The bottom line for cross-strait relations is that the PRC still really wants unification for real, and Taiwanese have no interest in unification for real.
Indeed, opinion polls in Taiwan show that nearly 2/3 of the population support maintaining the status quo. Only a tiny minority favor unification.
The tough issues are all in the future. They have not yet addressed the military balance or military confidence building measures. They certainly have not begun to discuss any kind of political unification.
The biggest question is the military balance, which is
of relatively less and less importance to the United States. And that's a political calculus that over the long term, which the long term might be 10, 20, 30 years, becomes less and less sustainable.
Amid all the uncertainty, Taiwan is gearing up for a presidential election next January, with Ma Ying-jeou's mainland policy a central issue. The opposition Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, has been fiercely critical.
The next DPP administration, when dealing with the China issue, will be using a new approach.
Given the ongoing military threat as well as territorial intentions, we feel we should proceed much more cautiously. And Ma Ying-jeou, from our party's perspective, most of our supporters feel that he is embracing China at the cost of Taiwan's sovereignty, dignity, and to some extent our democracy.
If DPP candidate Tsai Ing-wen wins, many observers fear a return to the tensions that marked the years when the previous DPP president, Chen Shui-bian, was in power. Joseph Wu was the Chen administration's envoy to the U.S.
But if the DPP has a chance to make a comeback in 2012, one of the fear we have is that maybe the Chinese government's going to repeat what it was trying to do to Taiwan in 2000 and 2004, just completely ignore Taiwan's goodwill gestures or try to suffocate Taiwan's international participation or to step up military threat against Taiwan.
It's a concern that at least some in Washington share. In a controversial comment, one unnamed senior American official told the newspaper The Financial Times that the DPP candidate Tsai Ing-wen left the U.S. with, quote, distinct doubts about whether she is both willing and able to continue the stability in cross-straits relations the region has enjoyed in recent years. But even if Ma Ying-jeou wins a second term, as Beijing clearly hopes, there's concern that China may increase its pressure for political concessions that Ma will find impossible to make.
If, say, in the next election and you come back and say to me, sorry, I'm not going to do anything on the political side, economics is economics, politics is politics. I have my own domestic base to cover. And that, I think, is probably the worst scenario for the Chinese leadership in Beijing.
It's not only Taiwan, though, that's facing a leadership transition in 2012. Chinese President Hu Jintao is due to step down next year, with Xi Jinping, a former provincial leader, expected to replace him. In the run-up to the transition, political tensions have been rising in the mainland, fueled not only by jockeying for power, but by public anger over inflation, corruption, and unaffordable housing. With the Chinese army playing an increasingly important domestic political role, Beijing has also taken a much more assertive international posture, sparking questions about how long it may be willing to display patience on the Taiwan issue.
Any kind of leadership change is, in some sense, troublesome. This always makes everyone more conservative about the Taiwan issues.
That's a very tough question, how patient they are. Unification is one of the pillars of the party. So if you let that separate province, whatever you call it internationally, stay there for 60 years like a de facto, not de jure, de facto independence, and the citizens, some citizens may lose their confidence in them, current government.
But some argue that the thaw with Taiwan is one of President Hu Jintao's most important legacies, and he has strong reason to preserve it.
Hu Jintao, I think most people would say on Taiwan, his policy has moved the right direction. So his incentives is to preserve that unambiguously positive legacy.
And yet nationalism, heightened by Beijing's economic and military clout and a growing perception of American decline, is an increasingly potent force in China.
They have this nationalistic, very active internet population and citizenry who are preventing them from having a smart foreign policy because they get hammered if they look weak.
After the F-16 announcement, the Beijing newspaper Global Times, which is affiliated with the official People's Daily, declared that China should not rule out, quote, seeking revenge on both the U.S. and Taiwan if new arms sales went ahead. In practice, though, Beijing has done little more than threaten to curtail Sino-American military exchanges, the same response it's had to previous U.S. arms sales. And in many ways, the whole Cross-Straits arms race is much more about each side using weapons to gain diplomatic leverage and strengthen its bargaining position. Yet with China, Taiwan, and the U.S. all facing uncertain political transitions in 2012 and the key issues between Beijing and Taipei still unresolved, this small island 90 miles off the Chinese coast will remain not just an economic success story, but a continuing source of tension and uncertainty in Northeast Asia.